Dan from Jump Back EMT here for part 2 of our health and wellness for the EMT from EMT curriculum. Like and subscribe so you know when these videos are dropping and you can keep on with your training. Listen to this to get your nuts and bolts, to get your principles and practices to help you stay sharp in your career or get you through school. So without further ado, health and wellness, like and subscribe. So infectious and communicable diseases. An infectious disease is caused by a harmful organism within the body. The key is harmful within the body. It's got to get in. Just because it's out there doesn't mean that we're infected. It just means simply that it's out there. Okay, I like to think of it as we've got a fence in our yard, right? And so if the dogs are out walking around your neighbor's dog and they poop in their yard, that's fine. It's in their yard. It's not in ours. Just because it's out there doesn't mean that it's in our yard, right? It didn't break the boundary of the fence. It didn't get in. Make sense? Sorry for the dog poop analogy, but it makes sense. Anyway, so a communicable disease can spread from person to person or from one species to another. So there's actually some diseases out there and some illnesses that can cross species. And so we've had a recent experience with some of that stuff, and there's a lot of them out there. And so they're not all species to species, but some are, and just be aware of that. So infection risk can be minimized by immunizations, protective techniques, and hand washing. The most effective and simple defense you have is hand washing. Now, hand sanitizer can be pretty popular and it is useful, but if you imagine you're working out in the car or working on the car, you got oil all over your hands, you put that hand sanitizer on, it's gonna kill everything on the outside of that. You still got oil and dirt on your hand. That hand sanitizer did not take care of it. It just killed the things on the outside. So hand washing is going to kill some of those viruses and some of that bacteria, as well as remove the dirt. So it is your number one thing. That is the best thing you can do to keep yourself healthy. So hand washing, hand washing, hand washing. So let's talk some terminologies now. These are going to be ones you want to know. A pathogen. So say it, pathogen. Thank you. A microorganism that is capable of causing disease in a susceptible host. What does it mean to be a susceptible host? Going back to animal to person, not all viruses or illnesses can go species to species. So it has to be a susceptible host. Okay, so a contamination now is going to be the presence of pathogens, which are microorganisms capable of causing issues for the host. So the presence of pathogens or foreign bodies on or in objects, such as dressings like a Band-Aid or a wrap, water, food, needles, wounds, or even a patient's body, right? We've all gotten a little oil or a little coffee on our shirt or whatever, and there's a stain. Well, that can get on other things. Have you ever spilled mustard on your shirt and you move your arm and bam, it's on your forearm? You just transferred goods. That's a perfect example of a way some of these pathogens and contamination can go from one thing to another. Now let's talk exposure. Now it's getting excited, right? Exposure, it's a situation in which a person has had contact with blood, body fluids, tissues, or airborne particles in a manner that may allow disease transmission to occur. So there's things out there, right? The dog poop is in the neighbor's yard, but it doesn't affect your yard until it's in your yard. Just because you can smell it, the dog poop, doesn't mean that you got it. Not a great example because of methods of transmission, but you know what I'm saying, right? Hopefully. So just because you're exposed doesn't mean you have it. It has to get in, and you have to be a host that's susceptible to it. It's got to be able to latch onto you so it can start doing its damage. So now let's talk routes of transmission. Ways that we go from exposure to actually getting that contamination. So direct contact. This is example. This is bloodborne pathogens. You touch something, and now you got that direct contact. It went right into a cut in your hand, whatever, right? It's direct transmission. You touched it. You've also got indirect contact through like needle sticks. So we'll say somebody was doing a shot, or somebody was doing something for their diabetes, or maybe some other extracurricular activities, and you picked up that needle and it poked you. That didn't go straight contact from them. There was an intermediary, so it was indirect contact, but nonetheless, you've been exposed, right? And now possibly transmitting to you. We've also got airborne transmission. This is where, if you've ever been around kids, they love to sneeze in your face, especially those little ones, just right, and it's all up in your grill. That is a perfect example of our airborne transmission. As they get rid of those particles, there is some schmutz in there that is capable of being spread. So our body likes to get rid of waste products in a few different ways, and just humor me, just say it with me. Pee, poop, sweat, and breathe, right? Pee, poop, sweat, and breathe. This is how our body gets rid of stuff. So as we're getting rid of some of these waste products, like CO2, but also getting rid of some of those old virus particles that we're trying to get less viral load in our body, it's going to go out in those little particles. It's going to be hanging out in that little bit of spittle, right? Which is why we all love it when kids blow on their birthday cake, right? It's just, everybody's enjoying it, right? So that's another example of airborne transmission. Foodborne transmission. Perfect transition from the kids blowing on candles illustration. Foodborne transmission. The food is contaminated. So you undercook your meat, or you've got your gallon of milk and that plastic piece on the side bulges because there's something going on with the milk. It's created pressure, right? And so now you're going to get sick. You got that bad cream, right? So this is examples of foodborne transmission. And this one I always just think is neat, your vector-borne transmission. And this is from one object to another, but it's a live object. And so a perfect example of this would be fleas and ticks. So, people have gotten different diseases like Lyme disease from ticks. A tick is a vector. It's a vector-borne transmission. It is carrying that to you. It is a live object. Mosquitoes with West Nile virus, it carries it. It acts as a vector to take it from point A to you, right? So that is vector-borne. So to recap our routes of transmission: direct, indirect, airborne, foodborne, and vector-borne, which is what? That's right, a live object carrying it over somewhere else. So OSHA now, your Occupational Safety and Health Administration, they give you all kinds of guidance on how you can protect yourself. It's really pretty simple. You're going to read it in your book, you're going to get in your lectures, but let me nutshell it for you. Wash your hands, wear your PPE, wear your personal protective equipment. If they're spraying schmutz, put on a mask, right? If it's blood's going everywhere, put on a gown, put your gloves on, and wear your goggles. Whatever's going to keep that stuff off of you, utilize that, okay? And you always have to have gloves. Always, always, always wear gloves. So I wear size large when I first get to scene, and then I have an XL in my pocket, because when those get dirty or they get torn, my hands are sweaty, I can't put larges on. Even though they're more comfortable, I can't put them on anymore. So now I put the extra large on because I want to maintain that PPE. It is an extra barrier. You've got a cut on your hand, no worries, there's a glove on it, right? If you don't have that glove on, you got a cut on your hand, you have just allowed something to possibly break your fence and get in your body. So wear that PPE. And the simple and most effective way to control disease transmission is what? Write it in the chat, yell it out, tell your parents, tell your friends, wash your hands, okay? Wash your hands. Hand sanitizer is great, but it's only killing the surface. Wash your hands. Get that dirtiness off you, okay? All right. The other thing we want to do is establish an infection control routine. And what this means is just making a lifestyle of infection control. For example, you don't get off the truck without your gloves on. You don't get off the truck without an extra pair of gloves in your pocket. Okay, I really like steel barrel pens. I've got it's like an F701 or something, but it's all metal. It's a steel barrel because I can use it to write my notes, but then I can grab my cavi wipes or my bleach solution and I can sanitize my pen. I can clean my pen. Right? So now I can keep my pen, I can put it back in my pocket, whatever, and I could use it on scene, but I'm limiting my exposure and I'm eliminating some of that possibility of infection. So make a routine out of it. Figure out what you touch a lot during calls and then wipe that down immediately afterwards. After each call, you need to be wiping your stuff down. Okay, your agency's probably got some cavi wipes or some sort of detergent or some sort of cleaning agent they use. And it's not just anything, because there's some pretty difficult bacteria and viruses out there. And because you're in the hospital or you're working in the ambulance setting, chances are you're going to come across some of it. I like to think of it as every person I come to on a call has something to share and I probably don't want it, right? You showed up because something was wrong. Somebody's sick. They were calling for help. So they got something to share. Do you want it? Find something to create a barrier for you. Wear that PPE and then don't leave it sitting on the shelf. Going back to resilience from our last video, you're going to go see another sick person. Maybe you aren't going to get the cold and it won't be a big deal, but what if you left it in the back of the ambulance? What if that sick person gets in there now, and now they're also getting exposed to another virus? How well do you think that's going to go for them? They're already sick. Remember, everybody we come across has something to share, and you probably don't want it. Okay, so PPE up and wipe your stuff down. Follow your, it's going to go for them. They're already sick. Remember, everybody we come across has something to share, and you probably don't want it. Okay, so PPE up and wipe your stuff down. Follow your agency guidelines. If you're using a bleach solution, 1 to 10. Enough said there. Don't be dirty. Don't be gross. Clean your stuff. All right, now immunity. I really like this one, and so we're going to talk about it a little bit. Immunity is basically saying even if a germ gets to you, it doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be infection. So going back to our fence illustration in the dog poop. I won't use dog poop anymore, okay? But going back to our fence. Let's say there's some sort of an enemy and they're trying to get over your fence. Well, the fence is that initial boundary. That's kind of like your skin. It's keeping everything out, right? But then when that thing jumps your fence, you've got your immune system and you got your white blood cells cruising around looking for a fight. When they recognize somebody's in your yard that doesn't belong there, the fight begins because they're trying to kick them out. This is like your immune system, right? Well, they're throwing down, they're fighting, they're doing their thing, they're going after it. And finally they're like, hey, this thing really cannot take a left hook. So they say, hey, let's develop some people that all they do is throw left hooks. So they just clobber these guys. Just like that, you've got a form of immunity. So that initial response is generic, but that secondary response after you've been exposed to something and your body's learned that it doesn't like to get punched with a left hook, we find those specialty immunity cells. So what they're trying to do with vaccines is try to instigate that left hook response with something that is similar to the disease so you don't get as sick. This is the purpose and the hope of the vaccine. It's trying to mimic the actual immune response of our body. We've got our generic soldiers walking around the yard trying to keep everything out in case something jumps the fence, something breaks that skin in case you get contaminated, and then it starts the fight. And then once they know how to beat it, they get more specific, and then they send in the specific soldiers. So once you've been exposed to something, you can fight it off better next time, which means you shouldn't get as sick. Also, it shouldn't be able to replicate, so you shouldn't have as much viral shedding, or when you pee, poop, sweat, and breathe, as much waste product because it can't replicate because you're left hooking it. So this is kind of the immunity. So just because you've been exposed to something doesn't mean you got it. If you've been taking care of yourself, if your resiliency is up, you're well rested, you're able to fight it off better. If you've been exposed to it in the past, you're better able to fight it off. And so immunity is a very good thing. So they say that sick kids make healthy adults. So a lot of colds, a lot of chicken pox, all that stuff, typically the adults are really healthy because that immune system really got worked out when they were younger. All right, so your skin is that fence keeping things out and your immune system is fighting. All right, so enough said about that. So in the EMS field, they talk about all kinds of recommended immunizations. You do your thing, know what's required for your job, know what's recommended for your job, and then have your stance in what you understand. Make sure you know what those vaccines are, what they do, what the purposes are, and then you just make a decision on what you're going to do. Right? Informed consent, just like we do for our patients. You've got it too. All right. So post-exposure management. Let's say that you've been exposed to a patient's blood or body fluids. It got on you. Well, now there's going to be a process because safety first. You just can't get sick and get diseases and still do good. So you're going to have to prevent the spread or the continued spread of it, continued contamination on your body. So if you get exposed to something, your patient care stops right there and you send it over to a partner. Say, hey, I just got blood in my eyes, whatever the case may be, take over patient care. Now we're gonna just start cleaning the area with soap and water. We're gonna wanna wash that stuff off. Hand sanitizer is not adequate. If it got in your eyes, we're irrigating for 20 minutes. Once you've ran enough water through your eyes, you're thinking, man, that has to be enough. You're probably not there. Give it another 5 minutes. You want to rinse the trash out of it. You want that thing spotless. I don't know if you guys are coffee drinkers, but you put some vinegar in there to clean your coffee maker. If you make that coffee before you've ran enough pots of water through there, you will know it because you ruined your coffee. You want to run extra cycles through to get rid of it. This is like irrigation for your eyes. You want to get that out as much as possible. And then you want to activate your department's infection control plan. It is a requirement for every agency to have an infection control plan because all of us in emergency fields, we are trained to handle bodily fluids and defend ourselves with our PPE, right? That's policy, and we get trained for it. Putting the stuff on correctly, taking the stuff off correctly, donning and doffing, they call it. But the department or your agency has a responsibility to have an infection control plan. So quick story, I went on a call, a guy it doesn't matter, but anyways, he sneezed, or he was just did one of those, and he blew blood all over my face. So infection control plan starts. So basically what happens from there is I let my supervisor know, I passed off patient care, I went and cleaned, I irrigated, I did all the things I needed to do, and then the infection control plan. Basically, the hospital got notified that there was an exposure. When the patient got there, they tested the patient for different things and looked at their record to find out if I may have been exposed to something. What did that patient have? Now, there's some diseases, we'll talk about hepatitis or HIV, that can be transmitted, and these are lifetime things, right? We're working on it, but they're lifetime illnesses. If they know I was exposed, they can start doing stuff like prophylactic care, which basically means we are going to start trying to medicate you to punch this thing in the face before it can take root. So you've been exposed. We're going to start looking for signs and symptoms. We're going to do blood work on you. We're going to do follow-up care on you. And we're going to start some prophylactic care, giving you some medications and some treatments, even though you're not testing positive yet, because we're trying to get ahead of it. Now, if you haven't been exposed to something specific, they're not just going to give you prophylactic care. So part of your infection control plan is the way you work with, your agency works with the hospitals to find out what you were exposed to and what you should do, and then the follow-on care of you. But it is your responsibility to run that up the flagpole, to stop the treatment, to clean yourself up and notify the chain of command so these processes can start to happen and you can defend yourself. It happens. I really wish I was wearing my goggles. If I just would have my glasses on, it wouldn't have been an issue. But we can't always have every piece of PPE on, right? Sometimes we miss one. But if I would have had them, it wouldn't have happened. So we're going to stop right here, and we'll have another video for this chapter coming up. But like and subscribe, and don't forget to PP it up and build up that resilience and clean the dog poop out of your yard, right? Your neighbors don't appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for watching.